My son told me he had moved my late wife's belongings out of storage and placed everything safely in my garage. 3 days later, a woman I had never met called me and said she had purchased those same belongings at a storage auction for $900. That was bad enough. Then she told me my son was standing outside her storage unit offering her $10,000 for one green ledger she had found behind a false wall. "Mr. Mercer?" she said. "My name is Nora Ellis. I think you should come here before I give anything to your son." I was standing in my kitchen holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier. My first thought was that the woman was trying to scam me. My second thought was that Daniel had told me the storage unit was empty. "What storage facility?" "Harbor Lock and Store. Unit 214. I knew the number. My wife, Evelyn, had rented Unit 214 for 19 years. It held antique furniture, family photographs, boxes of company records, Christmas decorations, my daughter Rachel's old piano bench, 3 lamps Evelyn refused to throw away, and more of our marriage than I had been willing to sort after she died. Daniel had offered to clean it out. I said no. He asked again 6 months later. I said no again. Then, 2 weeks before Nora called, Daniel told me Harborlock had increased the rent and that he had moved the contents into my garage while I spent a weekend visiting an old friend. There were boxes in my garage when I returned. I never counted them. I believed my son. "Why are you calling me?" I asked Nora. "How did you get my number?" "Your wife left a letter inside the wall." I sat down. "My wife has been dead for 2 years. I'm sorry. The envelope says Walter Mercer on the front. There is a telephone number underneath. I called it." "What does the letter say?" Nora became quiet. Then she said, "It says, Walter, if Daniel is trying to get this ledger before you see it, do not let him tell you this is about saving the company." For several seconds, I heard nothing except my refrigerator running. Then another voice came through Nora's telephone. My son's voice. "Nora, you are in possession of confidential company property. You cannot distribute it." I stood. "Put Daniel on the phone." There was movement. Then he spoke. "Dad, do not drive anywhere." "Why did you auction Evelyn's unit?" "I did not auction it. The facility did." "Because you stopped paying for it?" Daniel hesitated. "That account was being closed. The notices went to the company. I was handling it." "You told me you moved everything." "I moved the family items. The remaining boxes were obsolete business records and damaged furniture." "What is the green ledger?" Another pause. "Something Mom should have destroyed 20 years ago." That was the moment I stopped wondering whether Nora was trying to scam me. "What is in it?" "Dad, this is not a telephone conversation." "Then I'll meet you there." "No." Daniel said the word too quickly. Then he corrected himself. "I mean, let me handle this. Nora bought abandoned company property. I will compensate her and recover the records. Do not touch anything until I arrive. Dad? Do not touch anything." I ended the call. My name is Walter Mercer. I was 73 years old when a stranger who spent $900 at a storage auction told me more truth about my family in 5 minutes than my son had told me in 5 years. At the time, I believed I was driving to Harborlock and Store to recover my wife's belongings. I had no idea I was driving toward the reason my daughter had stopped speaking to her brother, the reason 86 employees had accepted pay cuts 17 years earlier, or the reason Daniel was desperate to sell the land beneath Mercer Architectural Woodworks before the end of the month. Most importantly, I had no idea my own signature was inside that wall. Harborlock and Store sat beside the interstate in a row of beige metal buildings surrounded by chain-link fencing. When I arrived, Daniel's black SUV was parked outside the office. A woman in jeans and a red jacket stood near Unit 214. She looked to be in her early 50s. Daniel stood 6 feet away from her with both hands resting on his hips. Neither looked happy. Nora saw me first. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes. I'm Nora." Daniel approached me. "You should not have driven. I drove here for 20 years before you had a license." "That is not what I meant." "I know what you meant." The storage door was raised. Inside, Evelyn's belongings had been rearranged into rough groups by the auction buyer. Her oak sewing cabinet stood beside a stack of old accounting boxes. The brass floor lamp from our first house leaned against a mattress. A framed photograph of our children sat face up on a plastic bin. Daniel had told me all of it was in my garage. I turned toward him. "What exactly did you move?" "Personal photographs. Some clothes. Your wedding album. Things I knew mattered." "You decided which parts of my wife mattered?" "That is not fair." "No. Fair would have been telling me you let the unit go to auction." Nora cleared her throat. "I should probably show you the wall." Near the rear of the unit, an old plywood partition covered part of the corrugated metal wall. Evelyn had installed it years earlier because she disliked looking at exposed insulation. Nora had moved a stack of file boxes and noticed that one sheet of plywood was held in place by screws newer than the rest. She removed it because she thought something valuable might have fallen behind it. Instead, she found a narrow cavity. Inside were 2 document bags, a green leather ledger, a flash drive, 6 folded property deeds, and 3 envelopes. Daniel stepped toward the opening. Nora moved between him and the documents. "I bought the contents," she said. "You are not taking anything until we work out what belongs to whom." Daniel looked at me. "Dad, the deeds are corporate originals. They belong to Mercer Woodworks." "Then why were they hidden inside your mother's storage unit?" "Because Mom did things her own way." He reached into his coat and removed a check. $10,000. Payable to Nora Ellis. Nora looked at it. "You came prepared." Daniel did not answer. I took the envelope bearing my name. The handwriting was Evelyn's. It felt strange seeing it after 2 years. Evelyn wrote small, precise letters, always leaning slightly to the right. I opened the envelope. The letter began. "Walter, you are reading this because one of 3 things has happened. I am gone. Daniel is selling the river property. Or both." Daniel looked away. I continued. "Before you let anyone tell you the green ledger is old history, remember that 86 people accepted less pay because you promised they would share in what the land became. You signed that promise. So did I." I stopped reading. What is she talking about? Daniel's jaw tightened. The recession agreement. It expired years ago. Did I sign it? You signed dozens of things during the recession. That is not an answer. Yes. Nora looked at me. Would you like me to call somebody? A lawyer, maybe? Daniel laughed without humor. That would be an excellent way to turn an old accounting misunderstanding into a lawsuit that closes the company. I looked at him. Your mother predicted you would say that. His expression changed. For the first time that morning, my son looked less angry than afraid. Mercer Architectural Woodworks began in 1985 with 4 employees, a borrowed panel saw, and a warehouse that leaked every time the weather forecast contained the word rain. I built cabinets. Evelyn built the company. That distinction took me 30 years to admit. I knew timber. I knew how to walk into an old courthouse, hotel, church, or mansion and understand which pieces of woodwork could be saved and which needed to be rebuilt from scratch. Evelyn knew numbers and people. She knew when a client was lying about a payment date. She knew which worker could be trusted with overtime and which worker needed to be told to go home before exhaustion ruined the job. By 1995, we had 40 employees. By 2007, we had 124. Our work appeared in hotels, universities, theaters, and government buildings across 9 states. Then came the recession. Construction projects stopped. Clients canceled contracts after materials had already been ordered. Banks became cautious overnight. For the first time in our history, Mercer Woodworks could not guarantee the next month's payroll. Daniel was 32 then. He had joined the company after business school and quickly become the person who understood every number I preferred not to look at. My daughter Rachel was 29. She handled design contracts and community projects. She had Evelyn's stubborn belief that a company existed within a town rather than above it. Daniel wanted layoffs. Rachel wanted everyone retained. I wanted the economy to recover before I had to choose. The economy did not cooperate. We gathered the employees in the main fabrication hall on a Thursday afternoon. Evelyn stood beside me. Daniel had prepared a plan. If every employee accepted an average 12% reduction in pay for 18 months, and management suspended bonuses and retirement contributions, we could avoid immediate layoffs. The room became angry. They had every right to be. Many workers had mortgages, children, medical bills, college tuition. I asked them to sacrifice because the business with my name on the door had failed to prepare for a downturn. Then a carpenter named Samuel Ortega stood. He had worked for us for 17 years. "If we take less now," he said, "and this property is worth 10 times as much when the city reaches us, do we get any of that?" People laughed. The river district surrounding our factory was mostly abandoned warehouses then. The idea of luxury development sounded absurd. Evelyn did not laugh. She looked at me. Maybe they should. I remember shrugging. I remember saying something about all of us sharing the risk. I remember applause when I promised that if the river property was ever sold or redeveloped, the people accepting reduced pay would participate in the increase in value. What I did not remember was signing a legal agreement 4 days later. Evelyn remembered. The Green Ledger remembered too. Nora agreed not to surrender the documents to either Daniel or me until we established who legally owned them. She did something I respected immediately. She photographed everything. Then she emailed the photographs to herself, me, and an attorney she knew through her small antique business. Daniel objected. Nora ignored him. "If 3 people have copies," she said, "there is less reason for anyone to do something stupid." Daniel looked offended. I thought it was the smartest sentence spoken that morning. I called Ellen Shaw, an attorney who had represented me in a property dispute years earlier but had never worked for Mercer Woodworks. She met me at the facility that afternoon. Daniel brought the company's attorney. For 3 hours, people who billed by the hour argued over belongings purchased for $900. Eventually, Nora agreed to sell the clearly personal furniture and household items back to me for what she had paid at auction plus her transportation costs. She refused Daniel's $10,000 check. The disputed records went into temporary legal custody. We were permitted to make copies. I took Evelyn's letter home. That night, I read all 9 pages. My wife had not written a dramatic confession. She had written an accounting of promises. The employee agreement was signed by me, Evelyn, Daniel, 2 worker representatives, and our attorney. It stated that 86 employees participating in the recession wage reduction program would collectively receive 24% of the net appreciation of 14 riverfront acres if the property was sold, transferred, or redeveloped before the year 2035. The agreement had another condition. No controlling family shareholder could eliminate or modify the participation right without a vote by the affected employees or their designated trust. It did not expire. Daniel had lied. But on page 5 of Evelyn's letter, the story became less comfortable. She wrote, "Do not let yourself pretend Daniel created this problem alone. You promised more than the company could safely promise because you wanted applause instead of layoffs. Daniel warned you. I warned you. You said the land would never be sold anyway." I put the letter down. I remembered that part. Daniel had objected to the 24% figure. He recommended 10. Evelyn recommended 15. I insisted on 24 because it sounded meaningful without requiring us to pay anything immediately. At the time, the riverfront land was valued at $3 million. Today, developers valued it above $37 million. My promise had become very expensive. That did not make it optional. The next morning, Ellen and I examined the green ledger. Evelyn had maintained it by hand for 17 years. Every participating worker had a page. Their original salary. The amount they surrendered during the recession. The dates contributions resumed. Whether they remained employed, retired, died, or transferred their rights to a spouse or estate. Evelyn had treated the agreement like a debt. Daniel had treated it like an inconvenience. Or so I thought. Then Ellen found a second column. Beginning 8 years earlier, amounts had been deducted from the employees' projected participation balances. The deductions totaled $1.6 million. Beside each was the same notation. Temporary operating advance. I stared at the ledger. What does that mean? Ellen looked at me. It appears someone borrowed against the employee's future share. Can Daniel do that? Not under this agreement. I called him immediately. He answered. I wondered when you would reach that page. You took $1.6 million. The company took it. On whose authority? Mine. You had no authority. I had an emergency board resolution. Signed by whom? Daniel paused. Signed by you. I felt the same cold sensation I had felt hearing Nora read Evelyn's letter. I never approved taking employee money. You approved borrowing against contingent liabilities to preserve operations. What year? 2018. 2018. The year Evelyn had heart surgery. The year our largest hotel client collapsed, owing us nearly $4 million. The year I allowed Daniel to bring documents to the hospital because the company could not wait for me to return. I thought those papers were for a credit line. They were. The resolution covered several financing sources. Did you tell me one source was the employee agreement? Daniel became quiet. No. The answer mattered because it was honest. Why? Because you would have said no. Then I did not approve it. You signed the resolution. You hid the meaning. I kept 118 people employed. By borrowing from 86 of them without telling them. Temporarily. 8 years is not temporary. Daniel's voice rose. What should I have done? Laid off 30 people while Mom was in cardiac rehab? Closed the finishing department? Defaulted on the equipment loan? You should have told the truth. And then what? I had no immediate answer. Daniel heard the silence. That is the part everyone skips. Tell the truth, and then what? He ended the call. The flash drive behind Evelyn's false wall answered a different question. Daniel was trying to sell Mercer Woodworks. Not merely the river property. The entire company. The buyer was Stonebridge Urban Partners, a development company that had spent the previous decade converting industrial districts into apartments, restaurants, offices, and hotels. Stonebridge offered $39 million for the company, land, equipment, and brand. It would continue manufacturing for 24 months. After that, It could move production elsewhere. The river factory would almost certainly be demolished. 86 employees believed they were entitled to roughly $8 million from the land appreciation. Stonebridge's purchase agreement listed that obligation as disputed historical employee incentive with no surviving enforceable instrument. Daniel had told the buyer the original agreement was missing. He knew exactly where Evelyn kept it. That was why the storage unit had to disappear. But the drive contained something else. A separate contract. Stonebridge had offered Daniel a 4-year position overseeing its regional development portfolio. The compensation package was worth nearly $3.2 million. There was also a performance payment of $1 million if the Mercer property transferred without any employee claim delaying redevelopment. My son could personally earn more than $4 million if Evelyn's agreement vanished. For one satisfying minute, anger made the story simple again. Daniel was greedy. I was betrayed. The employees were victims. Then Ellen opened the company's debt schedule. Mercer Woodworks owed $22 million. I thought the number was 11. I was wrong. The business had lost money in 4 of the previous 6 years. Material prices had increased. 2 major restoration contracts had run far over budget. Our pension plan was underfunded. Several machines needed replacement. Daniel had personally guaranteed $6 million of debt. He had mortgaged his house, sold a vacation property, reduced his salary twice. The $4 million future payments suddenly looked different. It was still a conflict of interest. It was still money he had hidden. But Daniel was not walking away richer after risking nothing. He had been using his own life as collateral for years. I had not known. More accurately, I had never insisted on knowing. That evening, Rachel called me. My daughter and I spoke every few weeks. She lived 2 hours away and worked for a nonprofit that restored historic buildings into affordable commercial spaces. She had not entered Mercer Woodworks in 6 years. I heard about Mom's storage unit. From Daniel? From Nora Ellis. I blanked. You know Nora? No. She found my number inside one of Mom's envelopes. What envelope? Rachel exhaled. The one addressed to me. There were 3 envelopes inside Evelyn's hidden wall. One for me. One for Rachel. One for Daniel. I had been so focused on my own letter that I had barely noticed the others. What did she write? Dad, you are not going to like it. I have had several days of practice. Rachel's voice softened. Mom knew Daniel was borrowing against the employee obligation. I stood. What? She found out in 2020. She confronted him. And did nothing? She did something. She made him create the green ledger deductions so every dollar would remain traceable. I stared through my kitchen window. The lights of my neighbor's house blurred in the glass. Your mother helped him hide it. Yes. Why? Because the pandemic hit. The company lost contracts. She believed forcing repayment immediately would close the plant. My anger changed direction so quickly it left me exhausted. Did you know? Rachel hesitated. Since last year. I closed my eyes. Everyone knew except me. No. The employees did not know. And they are the people who should have. The correction embarrassed me. Even after discovering a secret involving 86 workers, my first instinct was to measure the betrayal by what had been hidden from me. Why did you leave the company? I asked. Rachel became quiet. You know why? I know the story everyone tells. Daniel says you disagreed about the riverfront hotel project. That was the last argument. It wasn't the reason. What was? Daniel wanted to sell 2 acres of the employee participation land to cover debt. I told him he could not sell any of it without disclosing the agreement. He said the agreement was Mom's sentimental bookkeeping. What did I say? Rachel did not answer. What did I say? You said Daniel understood finance and I understood feelings. I remembered. Not the entire conversation. Only enough. Rachel had tried to explain something about legal obligations attached to the land. Daniel said she misunderstood the structure. I became impatient. I told my daughter not to create a moral crisis every time the company needed flexibility. She resigned 2 weeks later. I had spent 6 years believing she left because she could not work with her brother. I never considered that she could no longer work with me. The next rehook came from the 6 property deeds. Ellen's title researcher discovered that Mercer Woodworks did not own all 14 riverfront acres. I did. Personally. Or at least I had. One deed transferred 4 acres from Walter and Evelyn Mercer into something called the Mercer Employee Recovery Trust. The deed was executed during the recession. My signature was notarized. Evelyn's was beside mine. The trust owned the land itself. Not merely a percentage of future profits. At current values, those 4 acres were worth roughly $11 million. Stonebridge's contract treated them as company property. Daniel could not sell them. Neither could I. The workers owned the beneficial interest. I stared at the deed for several minutes. How could I forget giving away 4 acres? Ellen turned the document over. There was a handwritten note from Evelyn. Walter agreed after Samuel asked what the promise meant if there was no land left to share. Memory returned slowly. Samuel Ortega had challenged me again. I had said my word was enough. He replied that my word would not appear in county records after I died. I was offended. Evelyn was impressed. She created the trust. I signed the deed partly because I believed it was right and partly because I wanted to prove Samuel wrong about me. Then the economy recovered. The land sat unused. The documents moved into Evelyn's files. And I forgot a promise worth $11 million. For the first time, I understood why Evelyn hid the originals instead of leaving them in the company archive. She was not hiding them from Daniel alone. She was hiding them from any future version of our family that decided memory was more convenient than paper. Ellen filed an emergency notice against the Stonebridge transaction. The employee trust had to be identified before any sale could proceed. Within hours, Daniel called an emergency company meeting. He invited managers and supervisors but not the full workforce. Rachel heard about it and drove into town. I attended with Ellen. Daniel stood at the end of the conference table. He looked older than he had a week earlier. Stonebridge has suspended the purchase, he said. Our revolving credit agreement expires in 26 days. If the sale does not proceed, the lender can require immediate payment of $12 million. A manager asked what that meant. Daniel answered. It means insolvency. The room turned toward me. Daniel continued. My father has discovered an employee agreement from the recession. Its meaning and enforceability are disputed. No, Rachel said from the doorway. The agreement is not disputed. You hid it. Daniel looked at her. You do not work here. I am a beneficiary of Mom's estate and a shareholder. I have every right to be here. You gave up operational involvement 6 years ago. You pushed me out 6 years ago. I stood. Stop. They both looked at me. I realized something humiliating. For decades, That one word had ended disagreements in our family. Not because I was correct. Because I was the father and founder. So I changed what came next. I do not know enough to decide what happens now. No one spoke. Daniel looked genuinely shocked. I continued. The employees whose money and land are involved need to know before we make another decision. Daniel shook his head. If you disclose this before a restructuring plan exists, people will panic. The lender will panic. Customers will panic. Then we will all panic with the same information. Daniel pushed his chair away. That sounds noble because you will not be the person explaining to 100 families why payroll stopped. I will stand beside you. No. You will stand in front of them. That is where you always stand when there is credit. I stand in front when there is blame. The room became silent. Rachel looked at her brother. For once, she did not argue. We held the employee meeting the following afternoon. 109 current employees attended. Representatives of 27 former employees joined by video or sent family members. Samuel Ortega sat in the front row. He was 71 now. His hair had become white, but his expression was exactly the same as the man who had challenged me during the recession. I began with the truth. Not the version that made me look responsible. The version that required dates and numbers. I told them about the agreement. The 4-acre trust. The 24% participation. The $1.6 million borrowed without disclosure. The Stonebridge sale. Then I told them my part. I had made the original promise. I had signed documents without maintaining oversight. I had ignored financial warnings because I preferred being the founder who reassured people to being the owner who admitted the business was failing. I had allowed Daniel to carry responsibilities while reserving the right to disagree after he had already carried the cost. When I finished, Samuel raised his hand. Do we own the 4 acres? Yes. Can Daniel sell them? No. Can you? No. Samuel nodded. That is the first good news I have heard all day. There was nervous laughter. Then another worker stood. Her name was Angela Brooks. Her father had participated in the original wage reduction and died 5 years earlier. Mr. Mercer, did my father know you borrowed from the agreement? No. Did he agree to it? No. She looked at Daniel. Did you know he would say no? Daniel stood near the wall. Yes. Angela nodded once. Then stopped calling it borrowing. Daniel's face changed. He did not answer. A machine operator asked whether the company would close. Daniel explained the debt situation. No exaggeration. No comforting language. Without Stonebridge or another source of financing, Mercer Woodworks could run out of cash within 6 to 8 weeks. Someone shouted. So our choices are lose our money or lose our jobs? Daniel answered. That is close to the problem I have been trying to solve. Rachel spoke next. No. Those are the 2 choices Daniel decided you were allowed to have. We have not looked for others with you at the table. Samuel turned toward her. Do you have another one? Rachel hesitated. No. Samuel smiled slightly. Good. Now everyone is being honest. The employees elected a 7-member committee before the meeting ended. Samuel chaired it. Angela represented former employees and estates. 5 current employees represented different departments. They hired their own attorney and financial advisor. No Mercer family member was permitted to vote for them. Daniel hated the arrangement. So did I. That was probably evidence it was necessary. For the next 3 weeks, we searched for a solution. Stonebridge returned with a revised offer. It acknowledged the employee trust and offered $8.5 million to settle all participation rights. The number sounded large. It was less than the workers were likely owed. Stonebridge also removed Daniel's $1 million performance payment after the hidden agreement became public. His future employment offer remained. Daniel disclosed it fully this time. No one applauded his honesty. That was another adjustment our family needed. Telling the truth after being caught was not a favor. A competitor offered $23 million for Mercer Woodworks without the riverfront land. The offer would preserve manufacturing and 100 jobs but would not solve all debt. A local university wanted to purchase 2 trust-owned acres for a design and engineering campus. The city wanted another acre for a river trail. Those sales could fund the employee claims, reduce debt, and allow the company to remain in a smaller factory on the remaining property. It was complicated. It was slower. It involved no single check large enough to make every problem disappear. Daniel opposed it. The competitor will cut departments within 2 years. We lose the brand. We lose control. Rachel answered. You lost the right to use control as the main argument. Daniel stared at her. So did Dad. Rachel looked at me. He is right. There was something almost peaceful about being outvoted without anyone needing to protect my feelings. Then Nora Ellis called again. By then, I assumed there could be nothing left in Storage Unit 214 capable of surprising me. I was wrong. Nora had begun restoring Evelyn's old sewing cabinet before returning it to me. While removing a damaged drawer, she found an envelope taped beneath the wooden frame. It was addressed to Daniel. I called my son. We met Nora at her antique shop that evening. Daniel opened the envelope himself. Evelyn's letter began. Daniel, I know why you believe you are the only person willing to save this company. Part of the reason is that your father and I spent years making you prove it. Daniel stopped reading. His eyes filled immediately. I had not seen my son cry since his mother's funeral. He continued. We praised Rachel when she cared. We praised you when you fixed. Then every broken thing became your assignment. I am sorry we confused your reliability with endless capacity. Daniel lowered the letter. I don't want to read this in front of you. That is fine. He looked surprised. Perhaps the old Walter would have insisted. The old Walter believed family privacy meant access to everyone else's feelings. Daniel folded the letter. Then he walked outside. He called me the next morning. Mom knew about the Stonebridge talks. What? I mentioned the idea before she died. Not Stonebridge specifically. Redevelopment. What did she say? She said if selling became necessary, I had to take the employee trust into the room before the developer. You did the opposite. Yes. Why? Daniel answered after a long silence. Because I wanted one decision in this company to happen without someone telling me I owed part of it to everyone else. There it was. Not greed exactly. Not sacrifice either. Resentment. The kind that grows quietly beneath responsibility until a person begins to believe everything they carried is something they own. The $4 million package mattered, Daniel said. I won't lie about that. After paying company guarantees, I would have had less than people think. But yes. I wanted the money. Thank you for saying it. Do not thank me. I should have said it before there was a green ledger. That was the first conversation we had in years that did not end with either of us trying to win. The employee committee voted 6-1 against Stonebridge. They chose the more complicated plan. 2 riverfront acres would be sold to the university. 1 acre would go to the city. The proceeds would repay the $1.6 million operating advance with interest and fund a negotiated distribution to eligible workers and estates. The remaining employee trust land would stay under independent ownership and be leased back to the manufacturing company. Mercer Woodworks would sell 70% of its operating business to the competitor. Employees would receive 20% through a newly created ownership plan. Our family would retain 10% without controlling votes. I went from founder and majority owner to a small non-voting shareholder. I expected the loss of control to hurt. It did. That did not mean it was wrong. Daniel resigned as chief executive before the transaction closed. The new owners offered him a consulting position. He declined. He said he did not know whether remaining would help the business or merely help him avoid discovering who he was without it. There were consequences beyond resignation. The employee trust brought a civil claim over the concealed borrowing and attempted stone bridge sale. Daniel settled by surrendering part of his ownership interest and paying a portion of the proceeds from selling his house. The company also restored every dollar advanced from the workers' participation account with interest. No one went to prison. No dramatic officer arrived to place anyone in handcuffs. The consequences looked less cinematic. Lost authority. Lost money. Public records. Uncomfortable meetings. Relationships that did not repair simply because an agreement had been signed. Those consequences lasted longer. Rachel returned to Mercer Woodworks for exactly 6 months. She helped establish the employee ownership structure and independent board. Then she left again. This time, I did not interpret her leaving as rejection. She had a life that did not orbit our company. I was finally learning that children were allowed to build futures that did not complete their parents' unfinished arguments. Daniel and Rachel did not reconcile immediately. For nearly a year, they communicated only about legal paperwork and Evelyn's estate. Then Samuel Ortega retired. He invited both of them to his retirement gathering at the factory. Neither wanted to attend if the other would be there. Samuel told them that was their problem. They both came. During the gathering, Samuel held up his final employee participation statement. His distribution was just over $140,000. "I gave up $7,800 in wages during the recession," he said. "Not because I was generous. Because I was afraid of losing my job." He looked at me. Walter made a promise because he was afraid of losing us. Then he looked at Daniel. Daniel hid the promise because he was afraid of losing the company. Then Rachel. Rachel left because she was afraid staying would make her part of it. Samuel folded the paper. Fear explains a lot. It does not own anything. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Daniel asked Rachel whether she wanted coffee. She said yes. They spoke beside the coffee table for 12 minutes. Then Rachel left. It was not reconciliation. But for the first time in years, they had spoken without a lawyer, shareholder vote, or dying parent creating the reason. Sometimes 12 minutes is a beginning. Nora Ellis became an unlikely part of our family story. She returned almost everything from Unit 214 that had sentimental value. I insisted she keep several pieces of furniture she had legitimately purchased. She restored Evelyn's sewing cabinet and sold it back to me for $1. When I protested, Nora said, "I already made enough money from your family and entertainment." It was the first joke about the situation that made me laugh. I asked why she called me instead of simply accepting Daniel's $10,000. She answered, "Because anyone offering $10,000 for a ledger inside a $900 storage unit is telling you the ledger is worth more than $10,000. Then she added, "And your wife asked me too." "You never met Evelyn?" "No. But she wrote the clearest instructions in the unit. Evelyn would have liked Nora. 2 years after the auction, Mercer Woodworks still operates. It is smaller. 97 people work there instead of 118. Some positions disappeared through retirements and restructuring. Others were lost. I do not hide those numbers behind the word saved. 97 jobs survived. 21 did not. Both facts belong in the same sentence. The university campus opened on the river parcel last autumn. Its architecture program works with Mercer apprentices on restoration projects. The city's river trail crosses another section of land we once kept behind locked industrial fencing. Samuel walks there every morning. He sends me photographs whenever he sees something he thinks Evelyn would have enjoyed. Daniel moved into a smaller house 30 minutes away. For the first 6 months after leaving Mercer, he did almost nothing. He later told me he had spent his entire adult life answering urgent questions. Without them, he did not know what to do before breakfast. Eventually, he began advising small family businesses on succession planning. I laughed when he told me. He did too. "Do you tell them not to hide documents in storage units?" I asked. "That is Module 1. Humor returned before trust did. That is sometimes how families work." One afternoon, Daniel came to my house carrying a cardboard box. Inside were the things he had actually moved from Evelyn's storage unit before allowing it to go to auction. Our wedding album. Evelyn's jewelry box. A blanket Rachel used as a child. Several photographs. I looked at him. "Why these things?" "I chose what I thought you would notice was missing." The honesty hurt more than an excuse. "So you planned the auction?" "Yes." "You did not simply forget the payments?" "No." Daniel sat across from me. I moved those items so the garage would look believable. Then I changed the storage account contact information to my office. I let the rent lapse. "Why not empty the unit yourself and destroy the ledger?" "Mom kept inventory records. Rachel knew the unit existed. If I emptied it, there would be questions. An auction looked accidental." I stared at him. The planning was worse than I had allowed myself to imagine. "Did you know about the false wall?" "I knew there was a document compartment. I did not know exactly where." "So you gambled that whoever bought the unit would throw everything away?" "Yes." "And when Nora called?" "I panicked." "Why are you telling me this now?" Daniel looked down at the box. "Because you have started trusting me again." I said nothing. He continued. "And I realized I was enjoying the trust without having told you the worst part." That sentence mattered more than any apology he had given me. Not because it repaired what happened. Because he had finally told the truth at a moment when lying would have benefited him. I asked. "Do you expect me to forgive you?" "No." "Do you think I will?" "I hope so. But I am trying not to turn hope into pressure." I nodded. "That sounds like your mother." Daniel smiled sadly. "I have been reading her letter a lot." Rachel came for dinner 3 months later. Daniel was there too. It was the first meal the three of us shared in my house since Evelyn died. I almost ruined it before we sat down. I began saying that Evelyn would have been happy to see us together. Rachel interrupted. "Dad?" I stopped. For years, we had used their mothers' imagined wishes to pressure one another. Evelyn wanted peace. Evelyn wanted the company protected. Evelyn would forgive this. Evelyn would hate that. A dead person became remarkably useful when living people wanted authority without disagreement. "You're right," I said. "I am happy you are both here." Rachel smiled. "That you are allowed to say." Dinner was awkward. Daniel and Rachel argued about the university building design. Rachel accused him of liking every building that looked expensive. Daniel accused her of believing exposed brick was a moral virtue. I laughed so hard I spilled water. For a minute, they sounded 25 again. Nothing was fixed. That was why the moment felt safe. I eventually closed Evelyn's account at Harbor Lock & Store. This time, I went myself. Nora helped me sort what remained. Rachel took the piano bench. Daniel took Evelyn's office chair. I kept the floor lamp even though it is ugly and always has been. The green ledger went into the employee trust archive. The original deed went into a fireproof title repository controlled by independent trustees. Copies were provided to every beneficiary who requested them. Nothing important would ever again depend on one Mercer remembering where the paper was. Before leaving the storage facility, I stood inside Unit 214 one final time. The boxes were gone. The shelves were empty. The plywood panel Nora had removed leaned against the back wall. For 19 years, Evelyn had stored pieces of our life in that room because we did not have space for them at home. Then she used the same room to store truths our family had stopped making space for anywhere else. My son tried to erase those truths with an unpaid storage bill and an auction. But Daniel was not the first Mercer to hide a difficult decision behind practicality. I had done it when I promised 24% because layoffs were too painful. Evelyn did it when she allowed Daniel to delay a repayment because closure seemed worse. Rachel did it when she withheld what she knew because she wanted us to experience the consequences of ignoring her. Daniel did it when he decided a sale justified taking choices away from everyone else. Each of us had a reason. Reasons are important. They are not permission. I used to believe a family business survived because the family trusted one another. I believe something different now. A family business survives when trust is not the only protection people have against the family. Promises need paper. Money needs oversight. Workers need voices that do not depend on the owner being generous. Children need permission to disagree without becoming disloyal. And fathers need to learn that being the person whose name is on the building does not make them the person who understands every room inside it. Last month, I visited Mercer Woodworks. I no longer have an office there. I no longer have a company key. The receptionist gave me a visitor badge. Years ago, that would have offended me. I wore it proudly. Samuel was there meeting the Employee Trust Board. Rachel had come to review plans for an apprenticeship partnership. Daniel arrived later because one of the new executives had asked him for advice on an old supplier contract. For the first time in our history, all three Mercers entered the building because someone else had invited us. I thought Evelyn would have found that funny. I did not say it aloud. When the meeting finished, Daniel and I walked toward the parking lot. He asked, "Do you ever wish Nora had never found the wall?" I thought carefully before answering. I wish you had not made the wall necessary. I wish your mother had trusted us enough to put those documents on the conference table. I wish I had listened when Rachel tried. And I wish you had believed losing the company was less frightening than becoming someone who needed to destroy a ledger. Daniel nodded. That is a lot of wishes. I'm 75. I've had time. Then he asked again. But do you wish Nora had never found it? No. Daniel looked at me. Neither do I. We reached his car. Before getting in, he said, I used to think the worst thing that could happen was losing Mercer Woodworks. What do you think now? The worst thing was almost keeping it for the reason I wanted to. I watched him drive away. Then I looked back toward the factory. The name Mercer was still carved into the original brick entrance. The new owners had decided it was historically significant. Once, Seeing my name there made me feel permanent. Now it reminds me that names can remain long after control leaves. That is not loss. Sometimes it is proof that what you built became strong enough to exist without obeying you. My son sold my late wife's storage unit for $900 because he believed the contents threatened the only plan capable of saving the company. A stranger bought it because she wanted antique furniture. She found a false wall because one piece of plywood looked newer than the rest. Behind that wall was a promise I had forgotten, a debt my son had hidden, a warning my daughter had tried to give me, and enough paper to change the future of more than 100 families. Daniel almost succeeded because the lie did not begin with him. It began years earlier, every time our family decided that protecting the business mattered more than letting the people affected by a decision participate in it. The storage auction did not destroy our family. It destroyed the version of our family that required one person to control the truth. What replaced it is smaller, less impressive, more complicated, and real. I think Evelyn would have preferred that. But I will let her letter speak for itself. We have done enough speaking for one another.